Let's welcome to the program Dinesh D'Souza, and the author of, and also I've got to reference his filmmaking experience, Death of a Nation, Plantation Politics and Making of the Democrat. And by the way, Dinesh, I apologize. I am changing the subtitle on this, Plantation Politics and the Making of the Democrat Party. Being a journalist.
Fair enough. I understand why you're doing that. But yes, I've got the movie in the theaters. The book is in the bookstores. It's kind of my 1-2 punch. I mean, the movie lays out an emotional and inspiring narrative, and the book has chapter and verse. So one appeals to the mind, the other appeals to the mind and the heart. And I would ask people to check out both.
Definitely. Let's talk about this. And of course, I found it interesting. I was chatting with somebody about this last week, and I said, and it's PG-13. And they said, no, it can't be. I said, yes, it is. Okay, let's talk about what's the justification for PG-13. Although I will say to you, in reality, and I say this not in jest, but in reality, what we're talking about is a little frightening. And I'm a little concerned about youngsters of age 13 or younger getting caught up in what I think is kind of a frightening experience. But your observation on that?
Well, certainly with regard to the rating, we do not hold back in showing some lurid scenes involving the Ku Klux Klan, right, involving the rise of the early Nazi Party. We show book burnings and beatings. And so there's a certain level of violence, nothing that can't be handled by any, mature teen. But on the other hand, that's a little bit, we were a little afraid of an R rating, and we're happy not to get that. And there's no reason, there's certainly no sexuality in the movie. There is some violence in it, and the violence reflects the political violence that's in the reality of the last century.
Counterintuitively, I would say that the PG-13 is a clear indication to the audience that we're talking about something very serious, and it's not something that we should, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we should take lightly.
That is quite right. Part of what's happened since Trump's election is that some very loaded and incendiary words have entered the political bloodstream. One is the word white supremacy. The other is fascism. And these are words seriously intended against the President of the United States and against his party. They're intended to essentially delegitimize the result of a democratic election. In a sense, there are serious people who contend with a straight face that Trump is like Hitler circa 1933, and their argument is that if we lived in Nazi Germany at that time, we would be justified, even if Trump was elected legitimately, in using any means necessary to get rid of Hitler. And so this now becomes the operating template for justifying political violence, all attempts at a legal coup, just about whatever tactic works in trying to undermine, if not capsize, Trump presidency.
Dinesh, the other aspect of this, and related to those incendiary terms you just used a few moments ago, white supremacist, Nazism, fascism, in some regards have diminished the real fright of those words in their process of being utilized in I'll use the term, a benign environment, and which sort of sets us up for being sucked back into those very mindsets.
Well, it's certainly true that, when we think of Nazism today, we inevitably and naturally think of the Holocaust, gas chambers, a world war, really millions of people killed. Now, no one seriously is maintaining that Trump has done that. Trump hasn't gassed 6 million Jews. Trump hasn't started a world war. So therefore, what the left is saying is that this isn't Nazism 1945, but it is Nazism circa 1933. And what I do is I basically say, look, one of the problems is that we have lost sight of what these things mean. Why did people join the fascist parties all over Europe, by the way? Why did people join the Nazi Party? What did these ideologies stand for? In the movie, for example, I put up the Nazi 25-point platform because the Nazis in 1933 were the largest elected party in Germany. And my reason for doing this is to ask the serious question, is Nazism and fascism on the right or on the left? And then here we go, down the list. State control of banks, state control of healthcare, state control of education, state control of religious liberty. So as you go down the list, it suddenly occurs to, I think, any fair-minded person that, wait a minute, there's nothing right-wing about this. Trump would not be on board for any of it. And in fact, this is a left-wing agenda which shouldn't surprise us entirely. After all, the Nazi Party, the very word Nazi is a compression of National Nacional and Socialista. So they were national socialists, and they meant it.
It does diminish. It diminishes the overall threat of what we're talking about, and at the same time, it diminishes what we're trying to do as a country. And let's talk about this in relationship, sadly, to the Democrat Party. Democrats have a long history, a very long history, sadly, of racism, a long history of the whole issue of, you've used this throughout the book and the film, plantation politics. Has the Democrat Party, though, in your opinion, been consumed by a socialist movement? Is that, in fact, part of the problem, or is it something that the Democrats have been deep in the heart of a Democrat mantra all along?
Well, the party has both changed and remained the same. And by that I mean that there are some continuities that can go all the way back to the founding of the party. One reason I use the term plantation politics is that the Democrats are still the party of the ethnic plantation. Now, the plantation today is not the same as it was in 1830. Obviously, we don't have legalized slavery. But what we have is a multicultural plantation where Democrats today administer these ghettos for blacks and barrios for Latinos and reservations for Native Americans. And true, these people aren't being forced to work. In fact, in some ways, the Democrats encourage them not to work. But the reason that they encourage people not to work is so that they can create a system of intergenerational dependency, so that these ethnic groups have to vote 90% for the Democratic Party to provide them with housing and so on. So we have changes, but at the same time, the plantation ideology, the notion of exploiting ethnic groups en masse for political gain, that remains a defining feature of the Democratic Party. Same with socialism. The Democratic Party flirted with socialism, certainly in the 30s during the Great Depression. Socialism appears to be making kind of a comeback in Democratic quarters now, and that reflects, I would call it, the post-Obama, post-Hillary Democratic Party.
You say somewhat making a comeback. It's coming back full force. Let me introduce you to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders. Dinesh D'Souza, our guest this afternoon. I say that with tongue firmly planted in cheek, the author of Death of a Nation. The question, of course, is, can we save America? And note here, a second time? We saved it the first time. Describe the first time so that we understand the second time as well.
Well, the movie actually has a poster that morphs the faces, the heads of Lincoln and Trump. And the reason for doing this is not to directly compare the two as men, but to actually note an eerie similarity in their situation. Lincoln was an outsider. He was elected unexpectedly. And the moment he won, all hell broke loose. The rival party, the Democratic Party, even in the North, they were very angry. They were calling some people for Lincoln's assassination. In the South, of course, let's break up the country instead of enduring a Lincoln presidency. And some of that craziness is with us now. So I think that Lincoln unified America and saved it for the first time. And I'm arguing that the American dream is now again precariously in the balance. The threat once again comes from the rival, i.e. the Democratic Party. Once again, it is up to good Americans, smart Americans, to inform themselves, be vigilant, save America for the second time.
Dinesh, you're an observer of history, you're an observer of current events as well. Is this a situation, and this is a bit of a stretch, but bear with me, please. Dinesh D'Souza again joining us this afternoon. Is this as part of a situation that was precipitated by such a contrast of Donald Trump, or was it something that was slowly accruing? And I have my own opinion of that, but I'm curious what your conclusion is. Was this something that basically the election of Donald Trump turned on the lights sort of thing, or was it something that had been gradually growing and Donald Trump is just sort of the manifestation of a reaction to that?
Yes, I think that some people think that Trump is the cause of the division. He's the cause of this, but I think he's the effect of it. And what I mean by that is that Republicans have been nominating, well, let's call them the Boy Scouts, one after the other, Romney, McCain, people with very good resumes, actually very decent people, but somewhat invertebrate, somewhat weak politically. And the Democrats were able to slam these guys against the wall and convert them into Lucifer in 15 minutes. And so finally, the ordinary Republican went, well, it's very obvious the Democratic Party is gangsterized. They will absolutely destroy the reputations of anybody who doesn't know how to fight back. For the first time, we need to pick a kind of a tough guy, if you will, a boss of our own, to take on their bosses, to throw some disinfectant light on what has been going on under the rug in American politics. So Trump represents a threat to the existing order. And notice that there's a Republican faction that's against Trump as well, because in a sense, you could argue that they have also been part of the swamp.
Yeah, and of course, that is the swamp we're talking about. The other aspect of this, Dinesh, and as I was asking you that question a few moments ago, it dawned on me. I said, if you think back, Occupy Wall Street was really the first serious, and there are probably other experiences, but one that sort of galvanizes my opinion about the fact that the train had, as they say, had already left the station. And Donald Trump is, in reality, I think, a reaction of at least that event and the events that followed. But it just frustration, distrust for the swamp. The Clintons, a good example, of course, which you've written about. Also, the previous president, Obama, who facilitated the Clintons. This has been a growing problem. At least that's how I see it. What's your opinion?
I would just expand the diagnosis to include the complicity of the media. I mean, contrast the fawning treatment of Obama, the belligerent treatment of Trump. These are people who kill real feelings. They don't hesitate to brazenly lie. They report stories and leave out incriminating details that are relevant to the story. I also would mention for the first time in my lifetime in American politics, a major party, the Democrats, have tried to recruit the neutral elements of the state. By this I mean the IRS, the FBI, the CIA, DOJ, to be their political weapons. Now, this identification of the party with the state, this is a classical hallmark of fascism, because that's what Mussolini did. Mussolini basically said the fascist party in Italy is the state. Hitler said the Nazi party is the state. There's no distinction between the party and the government. That's pretty much how Obama sees it. That's how Hillary saw it. So, in my opinion, there was a gangsterization of the Democratic Party that occurred between 2008 and 2016. That's how we got Trump, to clean that up and fix it.
I've got a quick question, and we will let you go, because I know you have other commitments to this afternoon. But the role that FDR played in that, would that be the first break in that?
Well, FDR was, there's a sort of a canonized FDR that's in the textbook, the great saint of the New Deal and so on. There was a very ugly side of FDR that I bring out both in the book, Death of a Nation, to a lesser degree in the movie. In the movie, I emphasize FDR's collaboration with the fascists in Italy. FDR admired Mussolini. Mussolini admired FDR. Members of FDR's brain trust were going over to fascist Italy to bring ideas from there over here. Even the Nazi newspapers were wildly praising FDR and the New Deal, at least in the early years. So all of this was going on, and all of this has been swept under the rug by progressive historians. You won't find it in the textbooks. It's not on the History Channel. So young people don't know it. In fact, when they hear me say it, they look at me with disbelief as if I must be making it up. But I'm not making it up. It's there in the historical record. The other thing FDR did is he made very dirty bargains with the worst racists in America. Literally, the racist Democrats were able to come to FDR and convince him not to oppose anti-lynching laws in exchange for them voting for the New Deal. Again, these kinds of dirty bargains, you won't find it in Robert Dalik's massive biography of FDR. You won't find it in Schlesinger. So the FDR biographers are progressive, and what they essentially see their job as sanitizing FDR to give us an FDR that at least leaves out a whole side of the man. Same is true, by the way, with Lyndon Johnson.
I want to thank our guest, Dinesh D'Souza. I want to remind you, Jacksonville tomorrow, 6:30 p.m., 9:15 p.m. at AMC Classic in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and in Wilmington, 10:50 p.m., 3:30 p.m., 6:10 p.m., 8:50 p.m. Again, AMC Classic in Wilmington. That is Death of the Nation. We appreciate the time of our guest. By the way, co-producer, am I correct on that title?
Yes. I mean, I'm the narrator, creator, co-producer of the movie. So
and
very
author.
Excited. Please go see the movie and then look for the book.
And the author of Death of a Nation. Dinesh, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'm going to let you go. I look forward to talking to you in the future.
My pleasure.